What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We are presented by our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clements Bridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. And also, BYP is brought to you by Fresh Roast Coffee, Fresh Roasted Coffee. Go to freshroastedcoffee.com, enter in the promo code Back Your Play for 20% off your first purchase. And as we always do right here, we got the fresh roasted coffee as I welcome in my NFL guru, fresh off a holiday. That, of course, is Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game, part of the Broad Street South Network. Follow him on X at Lloyd Vance. And we are now starting to roll into the summer months, the dog days of summer. The draft is behind us. We'll dissect it a little bit, but we also have to get into a schedule release for the aforementioned Philadelphia Eagles. But it was always good to talk football with you, my friend. How you been?
Doing great, Q, and hope springs eternal around the league. Everybody comes out of the draft refreshed, and they think their team's going to make playoffs, possibly a Super Bowl. You know me, I don't always want to talk about winners and losers right away after draft, but I think all the teams are trying to get their best 90 players, and there
Yep.
should be some exciting training camps out there.
I guess I will ask you this. Were you a little surprised to move for Penix by Atlanta? Everyone seems, I guess, the one kind of whoa moment of the draft. Everything pretty much kind of played to form, but were you a little surprised um, by that?
Yeah, Q, it's going to be interesting to see as we go down the years who made that pick in the war room there, and what's surprising is, Kirk Cousins has what $100 million or so guaranteed on his contract, and
Yep.
they have him signed for the next 3 years. So I think they'll work this thing out. But I think that Achilles injury kind of scared them. And Kirk Cousins is 35 years old or so, and they wonder if he can come back. But they had already made such a commitment. You're like, okay, now you bring a Penix in there. You're not going to sit him because the days of Steve McNair sitting behind Chris Chandler for 2, 3 years are over. We're seeing rookie quarterbacks being expected to hit the field right away.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we saw how the quarterback kind of came into play. And I mean, look, I think the Bears are going to be a better team. I don't know much how stock we put in the pressure. They made some moves offensively. We know that they added some weapons for Caleb Williams. I mean, kind of a loaded question, but is Williams the most under the gun? I guess if you go back, I would say generational talent, Andrew Luck, right? And Andrew Luck's been retired for how many years now? Five, six? I mean, it's crazy to think about this. Have we, since Andrew Luck, have we seen a quarterback come into the NFL with as much fanfare as Caleb Williams? And if the answer is no, then with that being said, how much pressure do we put on this young man to carry a franchise that, for all intents and purposes, has never really been consistently strong at the quarterback position in the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, Q, it's interesting because everybody's putting him in that ilk of like John Elway, Peyton Manning. These are the type of guys, that surefire miss that people are talking about, kind of what you're talking about with Andrew Luck when he came in. And you know, some are putting that on Caleb Williams. We'll see. I think it's a bit much right now. He had an up and down career. Obviously, his Heisman Trophy winning season was spectacular, but last year he kind of struggled in spots. But I think he's going to a good spot with the Chicago Bears. Matt Eberflus, the head coach, is on the hot seat, but they have Shane Waldron coming over from Seattle to run that offense. And then they brought in so many weapons for him. Keenan Allen. Now, Rome Odunze comes in the draft as well with Caleb Williams, and then they had DJ Moore sitting there. So, everything should be right for this Bears team in terms of schedule. They're going to have like a last place schedule, so that may help as well. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think he'll be a solid player, and he's a front runner for offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I mean, look, you get a running game and you get some weapons, it helps you out. But again, we'll see how it plays out on Sundays when the season starts. All right, a little housekeeping with the NFC East. And, the Philadelphia Eagles, we know we talk about the schedule, and I know you and I, people get enamored when they start to do the wins and the losses, just to kind of lay it out for the betting public as it stands right now. And I'll pull out the numbers. Dallas and Philly win total over 10.5. Washington win totals over 7.5. A lot of wholesale changes from the coaching staff. And then the Giants, believe it or not, 6.5. Go figure, right? So let me pull up the Eagles for a second, and you tell me if anything. I mean, obviously they'll have the NFC East. We already know that, but get your thoughts on if anything kind of stands out with the Philadelphia Eagles and their schedule right now. Here we go. So they have home games: Dallas, Washington, the Giants, Atlanta, Carolina, struggling team, Cleveland, a little mixed bag, Jacksonville on the rise, right? Pittsburgh, new quarterback, new situation. Green Bay, that game is going to be played in Brazil. And then you have the road games: Dallas, Washington, New York, always tough NFC East. Baltimore, tough. Cincinnati, tough. The Rams, eh. Saints always give the Eagles fits. And then Tampa Bay. So again, I mean, think about this. This is a team that faded the last 6 to 8 games of the season and then got bounced by the Bucks in a wild card. So at first glance, again, when you hear that schedule, again, Dallas, Washington, the Giants, Atlanta, Carolina, Cleveland, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Green Bay. Those are your home games. Green Bay games to be played in Brazil. What's your thoughts on those first 7, 8?
Yeah, you always got to caution. Of course, nobody thought they'd lose six of the last seven last year, but it's really interesting, Q. When I hear that schedule, there are a lot of winnable games to me in there. The Eagles, you'd have to say right now they're in the driver's seat in the NFC East. You have to pick them as the prohibitive favorite, but you can't chalk these games up. So that game in Brazil right off the bat is going to be tough. Green Bay is a sending team. That's going to be a tough one for them. In division last year, the Eagles were 4-2. I expect them to probably be right around that mark once again because they're going to lose to one of these teams, the NFC East, that you think they're going to beat. And then in terms of the Bengals, that's a tough one as well. Out of conference type of game.
On the
Joe
road.
Burrow has all those weapons. That's going to be a really interesting one to watch. And also, Q, what I also like to see is in the next couple of weeks, you'll see the actual schedule. So when you play somebody,
Correct.
if it's on a Thursday, if it's on a Saturday,
Yep.
a Sunday afternoon type of thing, that's going to factor in there as well. So that's why I always caution fans who say win, loss, win, loss. It never shakes out the way you think it's going to because think about last year, nobody thought that Detroit was going to beat Kansas City on opening night, for example.
Wow. I mean, somebody had them winning a
Oh,
couple
they
of games as I pull some of my
toot his
other
own
notes.
horn.
Let me get to some of my other notes because I am curious to get your thoughts. We talk a lot about the players, right, and making the plays on the field. And you look at the NFC East, you kind of break down some of the moves that they made, even from the coaching staff standpoint. The Philadelphia Eagles have 9 new members to their staff, right? Sirianni's won 34 games in his first 3 seasons. So they add Fangio, the defensive coordinator. They bring in Kellen Moore. Special teams has always been solid. I pulled up the numbers. If you think about this, Jake Elliott fit 93% field goal percentage. Covey led the league in punt return, so they're solid there. But then you start to go to their offensive line, the running back coach, the running back position. Now all of a sudden we got to figure out a way to give the ball to Saquon. There's no more Kelsey. You lose Fletcher Cox on the defensive end. I mean, I always find it interesting. 9 new members to a staff is a lot. It's just if you replace the head coach, then more times than not, he's bringing in a boatload of people. Like Washington kind of cleaned house after Rivera and Bieniemy were fired, and Quinn made the announcement that Bieniemy was one and done. But I understand it's only May, but this is something you and I have talked about over the years. New defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator, kind of takes a couple weeks to get things acclimated.
Yeah, Q, and you hit on a strong thing there, with the Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody's talking about, oh, they won the draft, they won the draft. They did have a very good draft. We know that on paper. But
Yeah.
with the changes in the coaching staff and the big question mark in the room, Nick Sirianni is the head coach. Is he ready to be that figurehead and where the Desai and the other guy, were they the problem? They jettisoned them. Kellen Moore, we'll see. He's bringing that playbook over from Dallas and the Chargers, and I think it will work. But as you said, a lot of mouths to feed on this Philadelphia Eagles team. particularly have 2,000-yard receivers. Dallas Goedert's going to have his catches, and then Saquon, he's supposed to be the centerpiece and be able to run and have about 50 plus catches. So a lot of mouths to feed, and it's going to be interesting to see with all these new coaches if they're able to gel quickly with this group and have the Eagles be that favorite that we talked about in the NFC East.
Yeah, and you mentioned Saquon Barkley. I mean, look, we can argue until the cows come home about the acquisition for Saquon, but the bottom line is when they had Sanders underutilized at times, right? When they had Swift underutilized at times, now they're going to running back by committee, and that'll be Jamal Singleton's job. He's a running back assistant head coach. So we'll see how they utilize him. Then you look at the Washington Commanders, and again, you get rid of Ron Rivera, lifetime record 102, 103, and 2 ties, 3 and 5 in the postseason. You bring in Quinn, 43 and 42, all times the head coach, 3 and 2 in the postseason. They add in Kingsbury. To me, if Washington is going to be competitive this upcoming season, they must figure out a way to slow down teams. I mean, defensively, they just had too many breakdowns and they were giving up 30.5 points a game. So I think the hire for Quinn is sneaky good because he's a defensive minded guy.
Yeah, and they had to fix that defense. As you said, Q, they allowed a whopping 518 points last season, ranked 32nd in NFL in terms of scoring points allowed. So they went into the draft, tried to address their offensive line and defense, and I know they're going to count on Jaden Daniels to make some plays here and there, but that defense, as you said, Q, is going to be the key. They have a lot of former first rounders on there. They brought in Bobby Wagner, see how much he has left in his Hall of Fame career. Frankie Luvo, another linebacker they brought in from Carolina, and then Cleveland Farrell coming over from San Francisco. So they have some pieces coming in the door as well as their draft picks, and we'll see if they're able to get out of the basement. But it's going to be tough for Washington because a lot of these players are counting on are free agents or draftees.
Yeah, and they got rid of arguably their best 2 defensive players in Young and Sweat.
Yes.
You mentioned Jaden Daniels. That was their draft pick, obviously high draft pick. They brought in Tavika Pitchard, quarterbacks coach, played at college with Stanford, had that big upset win over USC back in 2007. How much do you think he'll have an impact on Daniels, or does it fall more on Kingsbury? Because again, I believe a quarterback that's coming in right away to play, I was a little shocked that their win total was 7.5. But again, I guess people are looking at change of culture. You're bringing in a better head coach. They'll be well head coach. They won't have the type of lapse. They had a horrible losing streak to end the season, 8 straight losses. They were not even competitive. So I get all that. But how much do you think Pritchard's going to have a hand in this? Or is this more going to be Kingsbury bringing Daniels under his wing?
I think it's Kingsbury's staff in terms of offense side of the football. Dan Quinn has empowered him. I've already talked to some people down there, and Kingsbury is going to be able to run the show here. And what we're seeing, he's going to be able to have these weapons gel. It's just, they're bringing Austin Eckler to running back position.
Yep.
He's brand new as well with Jaden Daniels. They have Terry McLaurin there who's been underutilized. Maybe they'll finally be able to use him. Tight end's going to be interesting, too, because they bring in Zach Ertz. You wonder how much he has left. So, a lot of moving pieces here. I expect this roster to be very fluid, maybe changes in training camp as well. But these coaches, as you said, have been brought in to coach these guys up. Joshua Harris has invested in his new team.
The thing about Dan Quinn, if you look at his numbers when he was with Dallas, if you go back to 2021, Dallas was giving up about 21.5 points. 2022, 2023, they were giving up 18.5. Go back to 2020, Mike Nolan was in charge of that defense, and they were giving up right around 30 points at the time. So point being, Dan Quinn, this is going to be a deep, this might be a team that's going to muck it up and win 16-13. And they'll be okay with that, just as long as the rookie quarterback doesn't lose the game.
And they got to keep him healthy, Q. And Jaden Daniels took a lot of hits in college. That was kind of something I saw on his tape. But his offensive line has got to be better. So, they worked on that in the draft and in the free agency. They brought in the Dallas Cowboys center. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting team to watch. I know we love talking about NFC East, and it's going to be fun to see, who's 1 through 4, all, because we know every season it's somebody else jumping to the top. Last year was Dallas. They'll probably be in champion this season as well.
Yeah, I don't see the Giants being competitive though. I really, I just don't. I mean, listen, we know
Yeah,
the elephant in the room is Daniel Jones coming off major knee issue and injury, and that's why they brought in Drew Lock, right? I mean, they wanted, I believe they wanted a quarterback to push Daniel Jones, but I also believe that there was some semblance of confidence by Joe Shane and Brian Daboll and the Giants brass by the moves that they made in the off season, if that makes sense, and then going after a playmaker in the draft. So I still believe their issue is going to be the offensive line. I believe Daniel Jones, they will give him a very short leash, but the problem is he's not going to be 100%. He might need a month, right, to really get in, the speed of the game when the season kicks off. I'm saying if he's relatively healthy and 100%, fine, but rust wise, taking those hits, the RPOs and whatnot. This is a team that was sacked. Their quarterbacks, their offensive line allowed 85 sacks last season. Okay. Tommy Cutlets got sacked 30 times. Daniel Jones got sacked 30 times in 6 games, and Taylor got knocked around and got sacked 17 times. So again, I know I said 85. I think one of them they didn't have as a sack, but be that as it may, 86, 87 sacks. Take it for what it's worth. The offensive line is still troublesome, and now you've got a quarterback in Jones that's going to be another hit away. I'm not even concerned about the knee. I'm concerned about the neck.
has a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, and as you said, Q, this is a 6-11 in team. It's going to be interesting to see if they hit that 6.5 number that you were talking about. The offensive line, they're trying to retool. They have left tackle. Andrew Thomas is there, a guy who they can count on. They're bringing in Aaron Stinney to play that left guard position coming from Tampa Bay. John Runyon Jr. to play the right guard
Yep.
from Green Bay, and then they're bringing over the right tackle from the Las Vegas Raiders. So, and they're moving Evan Neal. He's a backup, a guy they count on, high draft pick. They're just, from what I'm seeing, they're saying enough's enough. You're a backup. So,
Yeah.
Q, it's very fluid with this team, and you're right. Daniel Jones, his health is going to be paramount all through training camp. They're going to be watching him. And you wonder though if he can't play Drew Lock. I mean, he's not going to step in and do anything. And we know about Tommy DeVito, him and a little excitement, and a little liabilities with him. Malik Neighbors obviously is a very exciting player coming from LSU, their first round draft pick. But their quarterback's got to have time to get him to
Yep.
football now. He can run every route tree. Very exciting player. Maybe, we'll see if he has the impact of Jefferson in his rookie season with the Vikings coming out of LSU, but definitely an upgrade on a receiver group that needed it.
Yeah, stand corrected. DeVito was sacked 37 times. By the way, Wednesday edition of BYP brought to you by Play It Again Sports and Fresh Roast Coffee. Fresh Roasted Coffee. Go to freshroastedcoffee.com. Enter in the promo code Back Your Play for 20% off your first purchase. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us on a Wednesday edition of BYP. They also brought in Joel Thomas, the running back coach, who had a great run with New Orleans. And you look at some of their backs over the years during that time, they were tied for second in the NFL with 161 rushing touchdowns. Okay, but now that ground attack is a new look ground attack without Saquon. I always wonder sometimes, the moves that you're making from a coaching staff standpoint, if you don't have the right personnel in place, it's destined to fail. But yeah, I mean, I don't see this team winning more than 5 or 6 games, to be quite honest. And then you got the Dallas Cowboys, and the Dallas Cowboys, again, they made some moves here and there. It's all about the run defense with this team. We saw what Arizona did earlier in the season to pull off the upset. Then we saw what Green Bay was able to do in the playoffs. 12-5, 3 straight seasons, wild card, divisional round, wild card. I feel like I just keep beating this dead horse, so to speak, but Dak Prescott, Mike McCarthy, should I dare say a make or break for these two, knowing that, you've got Dion out there, you got Shador out there. I mean, crazy rumors flying around, speculation. So I would say the Dallas Cowboys, along with the Philadelphia Eagles and Nick Sirianni, 1, 2 might have the most pressure on them for teams in the NFC because I think Sirianni goes into the season as a lame duck, and I definitely think Mike McCarthy will not have 9 lives. He won't have his 10th, 11th, or 12th live, especially if this team starts off slow or they miss the playoffs, or better yet, Lloyd, they make the playoffs but get bounced early again.
Yeah, and on my show we were talking a lot about two teams, the Ravens and the Dallas
Yep.
Cowboys, where it's playoffs or bust. And nobody cares about the regular season. You win in the regular season, but you got to get it done in the playoffs. And both those teams, ironically, have lost at home in
Yeah.
in the playoffs, and particularly Dallas, they lost their first game right away and in very bad fashion to the Packers. And as you said, big bullseye on not only the coach Mike McCarthy in the last year, his quarter contract. Dak Prescott last year, his contract, the backup who they traded for, Trey Lance, they did not pick up his 5th-year option, so he's in the last year of his contract. A lot of pressure on this group to get it done. Jerry Jones and his son Stephen Jones have kind of stood steadfast this all season. Not a lot of big moves in free agency. They bring back Zeke. I mean, that's not a big deal. They bring in Tyler Guyton, big offensive tackle coming from Oklahoma, their first round pick. So they're trying to fix that offensive line. So it'll be Tyler Smith in there, uh, Tyler Guyton, the first rounder I talked about, Zach Martin still around. And then you wonder about the shuffling pieces because their center went to Washington. So a lot moving on with them. They led the NFL in scoring with 509 points, about 30 points per game. But they got to fix that defense. Micah Parsons, he's chirping all over the place, about the Eagles. And I think he really wants to be an Eagle, in my opinion, how much he talks about him. But that defense around him has a lot of work to do. So
Yeah.
Dallas, a lot of pressure on them. And I kind of agree with you that it's setting up so Mark McCarthy, it kind of blows up and they move on from it.
Little housekeeping before we close it out. Chris Nee joins the Giants as a scout. I like that. That's a solid move. We saw Rashad Penny now sign with the Panthers. I mean, that's a crowded backfield. How about what's going on with Rashid Rice and the Kansas City Chiefs? Rice suspect in alleged assault, according to Dallas police. I mean, this guy's been getting in trouble left and right here. I know we got to wait for more information to kind of come out, but I mean, when you kind of sit here and say, hey, you know what? He's just not worth the trouble anymore.
Yeah, he's another one of these young guys. You hope he gets it after a while, but Andy Reid has definitely started talking to him, and he had the drag racing incident earlier this off season, and the league was already looking into that. You don't want it to become like a Pac-Man Jones situation where the commissioner has to bring him in and suspend him for a very long period of time, but it's kind of trending in that direction. And Kansas City, they went out and got the fastest receiver in the draft from the University of Texas in their first round pick. So they're looking at retooling that receiving group, and Rice, if he doesn't watch it, like an old coach told me, you can fund your way out of the league. So he better watch it.
Did you watch the Tom Brady roast?
No, I didn't watch it, but I already started hearing some people rumbling and talking about, oh, they went to areas they shouldn't have, Giselle, uh, Robert Kraft in his situation, and then Aaron Jones, obviously, they brought that up. So, but it's a roast. I mean, come on, people. What,
Well,
what did you think was
the
going
funny
on?
thing is Brady actually got ticked off when they mentioned Kraft and the massages and the massage parlor. But the funny thing is he's killing his ex-wife Giselle. How much do you think Netflix? I bet you they paid him 10, $15 million to be part of that roast, to produce, to have that roast. I mean, so of course he's going to air out all the dirty law. I mean, I would be kind of pissed off too if I'm going to put that kind of stuff out there, but um, I don't know, man. It's not the roast I used to have in the 70s and 80s. It was a little more, mundane, a little more, drier with the jokes. Now nothing is, nothing's off limits.
Yeah, it's not like when Dean Martin and Richard Pryor and those guys had their roasts, and they would just give it to folks. But it is fun to see him up there. But it's going to be interesting to see how Tom Brady transitions into the booth, or like he's talking about being a part owner of the Raiders. I'm not sure if that's going through yet, but He's trying to figure out his next phase of his career.
I don't really know how he's going to sound, to be honest. I mean, I've never really, I mean, I enjoy his pod. I think he's well spoken. I actually, I think Greg Olson's very good. And I know people are kind of indifferent when it comes to the announcers, but I think him and Kevin Burkhardt make a really good team. I mean, that's a tough spot now. Now you're trying to develop chemistry and you don't want to be starstruck with Tom Brady, right? And is he going to be, critical of quarterbacks? Aikman does it in a way, Esiason does it in a way, Sims used to do it in a way, but you always say it's a fraternity, it's a fraternity, it's a fraternity. So I'm just curious, hey, is it, is he going to, um, take some shots, be critical?
Yeah, he's going to have to. I mean, that's what they're paying him for. I think they're bringing him in as the highest paid analyst. I think his number supersedes Tony Romo's with CBS, and it's going to be interesting to see how this works because some of these guys, let's face it, they don't transition well to the booth, and it's a tough job. You're a commentator, and it's a lot of homework. You got to have good guys around you with your stats and information, your spotter, etc. And then you got to be able to paint that picture for your audience. So
Yeah.
it's going to be fun to see how he works out. But I know he's going to have everybody over there. I think he's going to Fox. They're going to try to put him in the best light once he comes on.
Yeah, but you can't fake personality to some extent, but we'll see how it sounds. So, Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us Wednesday edition of BYP. We'll get regrouped for later in the week and next week as we continue to kind of break down all these divisions. We'll talk more about the draft and how some of these moves would help some of these teams that were in desperate need to fill some certain spots. And before we know it, OTAs, training camp, preseason, season right around the corner, a couple months away, and we can catch you on your own show, Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029, the game, part of Broad Street South Network. When can we hear you again?
Yeah, Monday evenings 8 to 9:15, and we're going through all the off season, and then we're kind of going kind of like we did. We're going team by team, looking at their draft, looking at the off season and how they're preparing, and there's always some story out there. Q, the NFL never sleeps, so
No,
we're going to see how this turns out
no.
going into training camp, and it may be baseball season, but there's still lots of football to talk
Well,
about.
I mean, listen, you got the NBA. My Knicks are shocking the world. Rangers won in double overtime. Not a bad time to be a New York sports fan aside from the football. So, all right, always appreciate you, my friend. Thanks for jumping on BYP.
All right, Q, thanks for having me on.